Every now and then when we are talking about prayer, as we began to do last week, and we're doing 2 weeks on prayer, last week how to begin to pray and how to speak to God, this week how to hear God's voice, I'm reminded of my favorite movie when it comes to this. And above any movie scene, movie clip, anything anyone's ever shared with me, there's one that to me reveals me and reveals you and how crazy our prayer lives can be, how just ridiculous sometimes the ways in which we seek God can be. There's one movie that really gets at it the best, I think. And of all people, it would be in the person of Jim Carrey. Now, some of you have seen the movie Bruce Almighty. In the movie, Bruce is in a bad place. And of course, it's when he's in a bad place that he begins to think about praying, right? Because our interest in prayer is directly proportionate with how hard things are in our life, right? And the harder the situation, the more interested we are in prayer, in learning about prayer, in becoming a person of prayer. And then when those things start to get better, of course, proportionately, our interest in prayer goes down. Maybe some of you can relate to that. In the movie Bruce Almighty, he's had a run of bad luck. Things aren't going so well for him. And so out of that, he begins to think, maybe I should give prayer a shot, and begins to ask God for what probably some of you and I have before, asking God for a sign, right? A sign. Has anybody here have the boldness to say that you've asked God for a sign? All right? All right. Y'all are more honest than the early group, okay? Or either they're just afraid to raise their hands in worship. I don't know. It could be either one. In the movie, he wants a sign from God because things aren't going so well. And you can tell, in that moment at least, how earnest and serious he is about wanting that sign from God. And you can see something about his prayer life. Maybe you can see something about yours too. Take a look.
You want me to talk to you? Talk back. Tell me what's going on. What should I do? Give me a signal. I need your guidance, Lord. Please send me a sign. What's this joker doing now? Okay. All right, I'll try it your way. All right, Lord, I need a miracle. I'm desperate. I need your help, Lord. Please, reach into my life. What the heck? Where are you? I got you.
Fine! The gloves are off, pal! Come on, let me see a little wrath. Smite me, oh mighty smiter! You're the one who should be fired! The only one around here not doing his job is you! Answer me! Sorry, don't know you. Wouldn't call you if I did.
There's a lot going on here, and a lot to learn, I think, from such a short little clip in thinking about prayer. I love how he is asking for something that he doesn't even really believe in. He's asking for a sign, but I think that he doesn't even believe in that sort of thing. He's out of desperation because he's tried everything else. He's tried every other possibility. He's talked to people. He's racked his brain for some clever solution to his issues. And of course that didn't work. So last resort, court of last resort, God, who I don't really believe in, but why not? I'm going to ask God for a sign. And he asked God for a sign that he doesn't believe in and that he's not looking for, even if it were to come. Think about that. How much can we relate to the fact that maybe we ask for things that we're not even believing are possible, and even if they did happen, we wouldn't notice it or recognize it or even be willing to even say that that was God? He says, give me a sign, and he sees a sign that flashes up that says what? Caution ahead. Does he notice it? No. Because he's not looking. He's not looking. And then he says, no, God, I need a sign. And then what? The municipal truck with 1,000 signs cuts him off. And he says, what is your problem, dude? And he races around the guy. The signs that all say stop, danger ahead, caution. And he has no idea. He misses it. It's not that God's not talking, it's that he's not listening. It's not that God's not speaking, it's that he's living his life like this. And then, of course, he decides, okay, God, I'll try it your way. And he gets the beads. That's funny to me. Like God's way is beads, all right? Like, yeah, this is the way. And he needs a gadget, a gizmo, a widget, or maybe in your case, it's a certain book on prayer, or maybe it's Pastor Wade's 5 Steps to Perfect Prayer, or maybe it's something you've read online. He needs something that's going to do it, some rabbit foot of prayer that's going to do it. And if you notice, he squeezes those beads because the harder you squeeze them, the more God responds, right? All you have to do is squeeze those beads really hard and God comes out. That's how it happens. So he's squeezing those beads. And when I see him squeezing those beads, I'm thinking about how real it is that we want some little gadget, formula, recipe, something to do, because we got to be doing something, right? We got to be doing something. This must require me doing something. All of which are a way of being willfully blind, or shortcutting the simple truth about what Andrew was singing from the Psalms, where it says, don't do anything. That's the problem. Stop doing. Be still and know I am God. And then he gets out of the car, and I loves it. He takes the gloves off. He's going at it with God, right? And then he says, answer me. And you may not know what that thing is that went off. It's called a beeper. All right? All right? It's a beeper. It beeps. That's all I know about it. And he looks it up, and in this case, it's God who always and everywhere has to be played by who? Morgan Freeman, of course. God. And he says, and I love this, don't know you. Wouldn't call you if I did. And puts it away. What more could God do? So much there. It got me thinking about a story that may be unfamiliar to you from Samuel, way back in the Bible in the time of the Judges, where before the Israelites had kings, they had judges who were really more warlords and tribal chieftains who also did some judging. But this is before they had kings. And at the end of that period of kings is where you run into Samson. Kings is where you run into Gideon. Kings is where you run into Deborah. And some of the craziest stories in the Bible, Judges is where you run into Gideon and Samson and Deborah. Some of those craziest stories in the Bible are in Judges. I mean, crazy. You're like, that's in the Bible? And after the period of Judges, there's a transition into a period of kings because the Israelites say, we want a king. And God says, no, you don't, because they're going to do this. No, we want one. And there's this this transitional figure between those two periods of Judges and Kings of a person named Samuel, who was a prophet that God raised up from a boy. And he was mentored and more or less raised by a priest whose name was Eli. And Eli was a mentor figure to him. And I want to share with you a little encounter that they had that I think is maybe a better model for thinking about prayer than what we see Bruce doing in the movie. Now, the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli, his mentor. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so he couldn't see, was lying down in his room. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. What was he doing? Was he doing something? No, he was doing nothing. Nothing. Lying there. Then the Lord called, "Samuel, Samuel." And the boy said, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." But Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. And then the Lord called again, "Samuel, Samuel." And he got up and he went to Eli. And he said, "Here I am, for you called me." But Eli said, "I did not call you, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel didn't know the Lord yet, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again a third time, and he got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." This is getting repetitive, right? Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy, and Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down." Don't go do something, okay? Don't go do anything. Go lie down. Go be still. Go be still. Go lie down. And if he calls you, you'll say to him, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." How many of us could say that we've ever said that with real integrity? Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. I'm still. I'm quiet. My body and my mind and my heart are all in the same place, which is rare. For your body and your heart and your mind to all be in the same place at the same time. Think about that for a minute, what I'm saying there. To be fully present. Fully present. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. The boy says that. He says, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Then the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I'm about to do something in Israel that will make both ears of anyone who hears it tingle. On that day, I will fulfill against Eli all that I've spoken concerning his house from beginning to end." Because Eli was raising two sons also to be priests, but his sons were rotten. They were stealing from the temple, the church. They were taking advantage of their role as priests to have access to women, have access to money, have access to food. And Eli was letting them get away with it. So God says to Samuel, "On that day I will fulfill against Eli all I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. For I have told him that I'm about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew was going on, because his sons were blaspheming God and he did not restrain them." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. What did Samuel do to hear God? Nothing. What did Samuel go and do after Eli told him? Eli told him, "Here's what I want you to do." What did he tell him to do? Nothing. Go lay down. And he heard this voice calling his name, "Samuel, Samuel." And what did Samuel do? He responded to that voice. There's two things kind of happening there, is that he was doing nothing, but when he heard a voice, he responded. And first he responded wrong, but at least he responded. At least he took it seriously, what was happening. And maybe he heard it in his ear. Maybe he just heard it in his mind. Like he felt the words come into his mind, as I so often did. But he was earnestly and fully present to hear that voice. I want to suggest to you something you may not have thought of prayer exactly in this way before. When we think about praying, we think about it as something that we do, right? I'm going to have prayer time today. I need to pray today. I should pray more. I need to learn how to pray. I wish I could pray. Whatever it is, the locus of activity is on us. What if in reality, prayer is something God does and that we simply allow him to do? That our role in it, much like Samuel, is to discover how we can be just available to God. Think about that word, available. I want you to say it with me. Are you ready? On three. 1, 2, 3. Available. One more time. Available. How available are you to God? I think a lot of us have permanently the out-of-office responder set on our spiritual lives so that when God seeks us or reaches out, he gets the auto response, you know? Like, I'm not here. I'm out of the office this year. If you'll get with my assistant or someone that God gets our auto responder typically. The God who is seeking us. What if prayer is about this one word? And embracing the reality that it doesn't require a gadget. It doesn't require a book. It doesn't require a spiritual bookmark, footprints in the sand that's stuck in our Bible. It doesn't require 3 steps. That prayer is just making ourselves available to the God who loves us, and we're clear in Scripture on the fact that he speaks. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening. Do you make yourself available to God? I love in this one little verse from Mark, we see so much about Jesus' prayer life. It echoes what we see from Samuel. Verse 35, chapter 1 of Mark. In the morning, while it was still very dark, Jesus got up and went out to a deserted place. And there he prayed. You take that one verse and meditate on that for a few weeks and read it every day. You'll know more about prayer than 99% of believers in the world. Because Christianity is nothing more and nothing less than following Jesus Christ. We see him rise early, tiptoe around the disciples because you know he did not want to deal with them early in the morning. You know, you parents know what I'm talking about. Tiptoeing around. Please don't wake up. Please don't wake up. Please, I must be alone for a moment. And him tiptoeing around and then getting away from them. What does it say? In the morning, while it was still very dark. Look at the details that are given here. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place. Deserted place. And it says, and it doesn't say, and he prayed. It says, and there. Just in case you missed it, it says, and there he prayed. People tell me all the time, well, Pastor Wade, I like to pray when I'm doing this and that and the other thing. And I think about old Bruce driving and praying, right? Because we're really, as you notice when seeing other drivers, we're really good at doing 2 things at once, right? That's one of our human great skill sets, is to be able to do 2 things exceptionally well at once, like texting and driving, for example, that we're really great at dividing our. Turns out, because I'm a student and a lover of science, that the idea of multitasking is a scientific myth. There's no such thing as that. What there is maybe switching channel back and forth from one thing to another, back, that we call multitasking, but that our brains don't work that way. And my personal experience, maybe yours is different, is that in terms of relationships, I know at least at my house, me multitasking someone I love isn't received as like really honoring that person and tends to get me in trouble. Particularly if it's Sports Center over her head while she's talking. that doesn't really get me where I want to go in that relationship. Multitasking. Bruce is multitasking God, right? Jesus, on the other hand, gave his full attention to God. He taught, hey, we don't have to make this up, folks. He said, go into your prayer closet alone, where only our Father in heaven sees and hears you, and there in the private, speak to him. Pretty straightforward, right? Jesus, in the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. He made himself available to God. Do you make yourself available to God? Maybe a different way of thinking about that is, do we avail ourselves of the gift of God's presence? Do we avail ourselves of this source of strength? Do we avail ourselves of one of the only, if not the only source of peace in our lives? So many of us feel a real sense of a lack of peace in our lives. And God says, here it is, and we say, no thanks. Too busy. Don't know you, wouldn't call you if I did. We don't avail ourselves of the very thing that would make us able to face the things in life that we face, the decisions that we have to make, the challenges, the things we dread. We don't avail ourselves of the things that would make us able because we're not available to God. We've crowded God out with every single thing. I see cars on the road that say salt life, lake life. Mine would say digital life, okay? We need a sticker for that. Or headed to the soccer field life, all right? There's one for that. The time that goes into this, where did that time come? Was that new time that you invented in your life? You went up to 28 hours a day to give it that? Or does digital life replace spiritual life? Does addiction to this, to being tethered to a device, the time that goes into that, the attention and energy, where was it subtracted from? It's not new time. There's not new time. Everything that goes in pushes something out, right? I'm not a mathematician or a physicist, but I think this is true. Conservation of matter. There's no more time. What would your sticker say? What life? What if it said prayer life? As a way of saying abundant life. Please don't think of prayer as something that is about our frenetic activity and mastery and what we do and doing it the right way. But maybe we think about prayer more as what God does in us if we let him. Maybe it's as simple as being available to God so that we can avail ourselves of that which makes us able. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.